Hi, I'm Father Chuck Peake, rector in the interim at St. Mark's on the Campus, Episcopal Church in Lincoln, Nebraska. And I'm joined today by one of our faithful members, and in fact one of our wardens here, rector being a name we use here for ordained leaders, and warden being one of the chief leaders of the congregation, both of us called to help implement the ministries of this parish. We happen to be sitting in my office, and we're here today because Pippa Lawson has a long history in this particular congregation, a history where she has worked out her faith in this congregation and where she's led into service. So we want to talk to her a little bit today, both about who she is and her involvement here and the faith life that leads to her service in the church and in the community. So Pippa, tell us a bit about yourself and then how you came to belong here.
Oh, how I came to belong here. I was born in Seattle. My father was the British consul there, and then he was transferred to San Francisco, so I was raised in the San Francisco Bay Area. My parents, however, had met kind of in the theater, and so although there was this daughter of a diplomat thing, there was also a lot of fun in my household because of their theater background. So I grew up totally stage-struck. And actually, the night before I was supposed to be the night before orientation into San Francisco State College, I said to my parents, I don't really want to go. And they said, well, that's all right. So I didn't, and I worked, and I had a wonderful time. And then I married, and I followed my husband, who got a professorship here at University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And I thought, I wonder if I should maybe try college now. So I was about 28 or 29, and I started at the university, and it was wonderful. It was wonderful. I'm glad I waited. I'm glad I waited, because I was a much more motivated student at 28 than I would have been at 18. So that was the happy ending, and then we had 2 children, and if I can put a date as to when I became a member of this church, it would be 1982 for sure, because my son was born that year and baptized here.
And baptized here.
Yes. Oh, I didn't tell you, though, that I am a cradle Episcopalian. My mother's father was an Episcopal priest. He would have been called Anglican because he was in Canada. But so I come by Episcopal churches very naturally.
Well, we learned in our first time of having lunch with you that you'd gone to the high school that the college, we're going to go to the college that Nancy wanted to go to, and her parents wouldn't let her go. They shipped her off to University of Nebraska, which is how we happened
and
to
she
be.
wanted to go to San Francisco?
She wanted to go to San Francisco State.
Oh, how
yeah,
interesting.
that was her. And it was in the age of the beginnings of the turmoils, and her family were not going to have her involved in that.
But there was a lot of turmoil in San Francisco. They were probably
right.
wise.
Yes, well, you came out of that same environment, so you know. And I didn't know we shared this, but our first child was baptized here in this congregation too. So we shared that. Well, once you got here, I know you haven't always been one of the wardens.
Oh, no.
But I know that you have always been active and that you've always had ministries.
Well, you know, I was thinking about that. And I have kind of an Act 1 and an Act 2 where that's concerned. In the 80s and the 90s, I was always in the choir, but I also was active in this, working for the soup kitchen, and I even coordinated things with for St. Mark's at that time. But what was most wonderful in those years was there was a group of children here, young people, who were just energetic and willing to do anything. And so I began to direct church Christmas pageants. And they were all wonderful. They all threw themselves into those roles, and they were so good. No, we took it further. We used those kids and formed something called the Live Poets Society, and we performed elsewhere, not just here at church. And then finally, I can't remember when it would have been, in the 90s, we did a production of Everyman, the morality play, and everybody said, oh, come on, you're not going to do Everyman with junior high kids in high school, are you? And it was well, you know, youth carries the day sometimes. It was very successful. So that was sort of my Act 1. And then around 2000, I went back to work kind of full-time, and so I did not do as much, though I always was in the choir. And then sometime around, I don't know whether it was 2014 or 15, we talked about bringing a refugee family here, and to sponsor one. And I heard that someone who was working very hard on that needed help, and I thought, well, you know, here I was all gung-ho about bringing something, we should do that, we should do that. If you're gonna be gung-ho, you should roll up your sleeves a little. So I began to volunteer my time for that, and pretty soon I was helping to get their apartment ready, and pretty soon I was collecting furniture, and pretty soon we were at the airport greeting them.
Yes.
And so, and then you may know, we have two families that we have sponsored, and I've worked for both of them, and that has been very, very rich and wonderful. So that's the act two, that, and then on one serendipitous moment saying, yes, I'll be warden.
At a time you didn't expect to get into everything.
No,
you got
no, I didn't.
No, the life of a warden is like that.
Yes.
I was raised in a family where my grandfather was an oftentimes senior warden of a parish.
Oh,
So I grew up on stories about being a senior warden, and that's why I never understood why, when I was still a layperson, I agreed to be one.
Oh, really? You knew what you were getting in for?
Yes, I knew,
Okay.
and I should have. Well,
I didn't.
how do you feel like your faith has prompted you to that service, and how do you think that service has helped define your faith?
You know, I had a friend who said, there's a difference between spirituality and religion, but they're both still very important. Spirituality is what you do for yourself in prayer and meditation. Religion is what you do with other people. You worship together, and you praise and give thanks, and you serve. And so I think that spirituality is kind of like a muscle, and when we don't use a muscle, it atrophies.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
And I think the same thing is true of ourselves as spiritual beings and what we want to do in ministry. You have to do it to keep the muscle there, and if you don't, then it goes away, and then someone will share a spiritual experience, and the listener, only because it's something that they haven't chosen to develop themselves.
Right.
So you have the two, but they're intertwined, and one has to lead to the other, and the service, which is rich.
St. Mark's is very blessed by your ministries and by many other people's ministries, all of whom I think feel the same way, that these two things go together, my inner life of prayer and worship and my outer life of gathering with the fellowship and working with the fellowship.
Right. And we do have some extraordinary people here who have done wonderful things in the field of ministry.
Indeed, and they're not just wearing collars either.
That's nice of you to say that.
Thank you, Pippa, very
Oh,
much.
My
Appreciate
pleasure.
your time.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you.